Ask about Illuminati. Says the chart in the Yuppie Ducks. Is it Disney mind control? Is this MK Ultra Deluxe? Occult Disney. Go wish upon a star. Occult Disney. Chernobyl to Jafar. Occult Disney. Pineal gland Pinocchio. Occult Disney. As above, so below. Occult Disney. Please enjoy the show.
Hello, welcome to the Occult Disney podcast, where we become ghosts and travel through time to find out the ins and outs of Saturnalia. This is the Ghost of Christmas podcast. Matt, over there, it's the Ghost of Christmas Paranoia. Thomas, how are you?
Ho, ho, ho.
See,
Jingle bells.
the little delay, I did think about what I was going to say for a second. That one was more worked out than my normal ramblings, I guess. So that extra 5 seconds helped.
I didn't mind it. I like the quick homage to Saturnalia right off the bat. I guess that's needed for this one.
Right. Well, I'm doing, Christmas quizzes with my students right now, and it's like a Jeopardy style thing or whatever. But they don't have to answer Jeopardy style. But one of the questions is like, what's the original name for Christmas? And it has stuff like Mercurius and Jupitus, Plutonia, and then of course Saturnalia is option C. Weirdly, most kids get it. I don't know if they're lucky or something about that name,
You got to change it. You got to change it to D sometimes, just because I know from someone that used to not study at all, you always go with C. If there's ever a guess, it's always going to be C.
Right. Or you get it down to the last two and then flip a coin. But if one of those happens to be C, that's probably a good option to go with. So, we are getting into Saturnalia, the more modern version of Saturnalia today, I guess.
How dare you? How dare you?
Well, it's a switcheroo, right? It's a bait and switch sort of thing.
It's baby Jesus's birthday, and I don't want to hear anything else about it.
You don't want to get into a Bacchanalia? Okay,
no, I guess we kind of do. I guess we absolutely have to do.
We can get into a Bacchanalia for 2009's A Christmas Carol, which this was my first viewing because I felt like Robert Zemeckis in the mid-2000s just fell into the uncanny valley and has never gotten quite out, and this is kind of in that uncanny valley. Like, I don't know. How did you feel watching this one?
I mean, we've seen we've seen every other animated movie, at least through 2006 at this point. And this one, we do jump about 3 years into the future. But it does seem like the absolute best humans that Disney has animated up to this point, out of all movies. Like, Uncanny Valley aside.
The thing I had watching it, though, is most of the time I'm like, why is this not live action? Let's consider Robert Zemeckis' career. It's so bizarre. I don't know how deep you are with Robert Zemeckis' career. It's kind of fascinating here. So in the 80s, he's making I Want to Hold Your Hand, Used Cars, Romancing the Stone, all three Back to the Futures, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Death Becomes Her, and then the 90s, Forrest Gump. Well, they gave him an Oscar for that, didn't he? Contact, I like Contact, Castaway, and then What Lies Beneath, and then the bottom just falls out. It's The Polar Express, Beowulf, A Christmas Carol. So at that point, he finally starts making live action movies again. Flight is good, but you can't watch it more than once. And since then, he's made pretty much movies that are not great to terrible. It's kind of a disappointing second half of a career. So,
well, what do you do after you've already predicted 9/11 and put it into the Back to the Future movies and it comes to pass? I almost feel like there is a correlation between the influence and the styling of his movies pre and post 9/11. I don't know if you're familiar with this theory at all.
Well, I mean, since you're putting that out there, yeah. 2000 Castaway. Next movie is 2004, The Polar Express. Have you seen The Polar Express?
I have, and honestly, I don't hate that one either. I think that might actually be a slightly better Christmas movie than this one.
It's a better Christmas movie, but it's got creepier, glassier dead eyes, which and to be fair, I saw it in Stone Mountain, Georgia at the 4D theater, so they condense it down to like a 25-minute thing and have special effects going on in the theater, and it's like the super cheap version of Disney or whatever, but like, next week you put SpongeBob SquarePants in there.
When you say the trimmed down version, I actually saw the trimmed down version of A Christmas Carol when it first came out, and I can't remember the exact details, and I didn't bother to look them up because it would have been a total different tangent and it didn't really matter too much. But I remember distinctly going to see a Harry Potter movie that was in 3D, or it might have been A Christmas Carol in 3D. It was one of the two. And let's say it was Harry Potter, and at the beginning of Harry Potter, they played like a 15-minute preview of this movie, or it might have been vice versa. And
Now I'm
it
wondering
was
if I did
kind
see
of
that.
really early in 3D still.
Yeah. I might have actually done that. So yeah. That sparks, because I know I saw most of the Harry Potters in the theater or whatnot. So, but
Well, and I'm almost positive too, it was the biggest ripoff ever, and maybe it was in the fine print somewhere, but I think about 15 to 20 minutes into the Harry Potter movie, it literally came up on the screen and it said, "The 3D portion of the movie is now over. You can remove your glasses." And I just thought, what an absolute bait and switch. There was nothing in any of the marketing materials that just said, "Oh, by the way, it's only the first 15 minutes that you're paying for 3D and the rest is a regular movie." But
well, I
the
watched.
first part was all Christmas Carol condensed version, and that was actually really good. And I could even see it as I was watching this. Oh, that's why the composition looks like this, because they were really trying to get every last drop out of like that 3D perspective for people that were watching it in 3D.
I think animation, you could get away with a little more. I know I saw the last Harry Potter movie in 3D, and it looked just like a hot mess.
Yeah, I mean, I was hoping that it would be something bigger and better, but I do remember it being somewhat of a better experience than the Harry Potter version of it, which was just 2D retrofitted to be 3D. You said since this is animated, and that might actually be one of the reasons that you would want to go animated instead of live action, is that it kind of opens it up to all these extra possibilities, regardless of the movie's good or not. It still has more, reusability, I think.
The third one of this Zemeckis trinity of what I consider unsightly messes. Um, just to keep throwing out my thing. I just don't like this weird mocap thing. Beowulf. Did you see that one? That's the one that I guess might actually be good.
I don't think I did. Ironically, it's the only one that I haven't really seen.
Yeah.
3D. This was 3D movie.
Right. It's called Image. Zemeckis's company is called Image Movers Digital. This is one of two that Disney released. The other one they did is Mars Needs Moms, which we'll be getting to in a few months, I suppose. A movie I don't really know much about. He didn't direct that one, but it's the only Image Movers Digital projects made before the studio was shut down by the Walt Disney Company for unsatisfactory box office results. So
there's a selling point right there.
They did not consider this a success. The movie itself, it's another one like last week's where it's like it looks like it made money, but they claim it didn't. 175 to 200 million dollar budget. You could have cut that in half if you did this live action, I think. Box office worldwide 325. So it's one of those things where they spent so much on marketing and I guess getting in from a Harry Potter movie and that sort of thing that it still was not like financially successful. Looks like it on paper though.
Yeah, go figure. Victorian, stories don't land the same way in the early 2000s.
I mean, ghosts do. I mean, that is, I guess, the reason that this is digital. The excuse for it being digital is, we can do all this crazy ghost stuff and reality warping effects to show the ghost stuff, which is cool. But you could find creative ways to do stuff in live action too.
Yeah, well, when you say like bending reality, like the closest they got, I guess, when I was watching this, is they have a scene where the room turns into this multi-dimensional window into another world. But that's just Soren. They just recreated the experience of Soren inside A Christmas Carol, and we're bending reality, man. We're showing you past, present, and future. And yeah, I think they've already accomplished all this in reality in the parks.
Yeah, because especially the early scenes that before the ghost stuff starts, it's like it looks dull. It would have been more interesting in live action because then there would have been more thoughts about like
I
real
mean, what
lighting and
year did
stuff,
Labyrinth
performance.
come out?
Was that Labyrinth?
And like the talking door knockers and everything.
A Labyrinth?
I mean, I'm just saying Labyrinth had already done in practical effects a lot of the things that this movie was attempting to do, maybe minus the Pepper's ghost holographic, ghost sort of look, but all of the things that they were really trying to pull off. Because you're making a great point that you would resort to animation when to do something practically would just not be possible, and then just exploit that over and over again to really justify the medium being 3D or animation. Look at every single animated Disney movie. They have animals talking constantly. That's a great reason. You've got animals talking. Now you've got a reason to do everything animated instead of live action. Because anytime you had live action, especially practically, you were just like feeding things, animals peanut butter or something. But this case, they do everything in 3D that doesn't necessarily have to be done in 3D. A lot of it could have been done practically and has been.
Yeah. The thing, I guess that's the thing. Bobby Z's career, has so much like Back to the Future. Roger Rabbit is pushing the technological ball forward. Forrest Gump, like it or hate it, it pushes the ball forward. Contact, trippy visuals. Castaway has a crazy plane crash. It's like he's obviously able to do really impressive stuff using both mediums, right? So it seems like a cheat to just do it all in 3D animation to me.
I mean, again, there's a pre and post 9/11 at play here, right? Like something changed drastically. Maybe they cut off the source to all of the sort of Wag the Dog. Remember the movie Wag the Dog, where they were showing how far along Hollywood CGI had come, and that you could make absolutely convincing end products that would make people think we were at war, think that all these other things were going on just behind a green screen, which was pretty much a very like telling on yourself approach to let the entire world know in this Wag the Dog movie, hey, look at the tech we've had forever. Look at how easy it is to do all this. And I think that around 9/11, maybe there was a reason. I'm not even going to speculate what that reason might have been, but to scale back the realism and let's start pumping this uncanny valley. Let's start putting more into like the 3D. So I don't know. I'm speculating here.
Well, yeah, we do get so much CG gloop in the 2000s, and we still do today, of course. Now we're getting the volume or whatever, which looked cool the first time I saw it in The Mandalorian, and now it's like, ugh.
Look at how horrible it holds up, though. I think there was that novel aspect of it. Like every time you go to see the movie, you're expecting an incremental amount of progress, deviating a little bit further away from Uncanny Valley, more towards that like subsurface scattering and skin texture and something that doesn't give you the weird ick as you're watching humans. And you can kind of see that slowly progress a little bit. I don't know if we're ever going to, like, we're still in the middle of it now, right? 2024, we have not got over Uncanny Valley in any medium that I'm aware of. Maybe someone listening from the future back on this is like, oh, they didn't get there yet. But yeah, we're still in the middle of this, and I'm still expecting that same incremental change. And it's crazy to see the delta between early 2000s and 2020. That 2 decade span made a lot of difference. But I don't know if do we have 2 decades left, 6 decades, 8 decades? Like how much longer until it's absolutely convincing?
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, like, again, when I didn't know what it was, and I saw The Mandalorian, I was like, whoa, they must be spending some money on this. But I'm an ardent Trekkie in the last few seasons of live action Trek, which I have enjoyed a lot. But every time they use the volume, I was like, I don't like this. I like the practical sets, which they still have those too, but it's a mixture, right? So
I think there's something really interesting with the human brain and at some level on that cheesy 1980s CGI where it's clearly green screen, but you can still suspend your disbelief and you don't feel weird about it, it almost makes it endearing. And I don't even think that's a nostalgic way. It looks better than something that ages itself out of CGI, where it looked good as like the novel comparison to what you were expecting from years previous, but you look back on it and it still looks way worse if it's all done in CGI. Look at even now when they do the de-aging and you see they use a CG version of a younger person's face on that actor. You know, they'll de-age Harrison Ford, or they'll de-age characters in Star Wars and bring people back to life. And even those have that same weird uncanny valley feel to them that I don't think goes away. And I think that all those will age horribly compared to just, 1990s action flicks with green screen and Back to the Future. I think those just look better and they age better because they lack that weird uncanny valley feeling.
Yeah, it's like I just rewatched Aliens for another podcast, and there are a few shots at the end when the ship is escaping, their shuttlecraft is escaping the planet or whatever. It's a dodgy shot, but I'm like, it's creative, That actually was the best you could do in 1986. He was working with a crew that hated him in England, James Cameron, that is. So I'm like, this is cool. It doesn't, like, one of my favorite effects ever is the 1960 time machine where the volcano explodes in London, that's an impossible effect to do in 1960. And it doesn't look real at all, but there's so much creativity in it. I just love that shot. It's clearly a model, but it's like they really did a lot of work on this, even though it didn't technically succeed.
Imagine taking everyone that had what it took to make really compelling cinema in the 50s or 60s and get those weird shots and used totally out of the box solutions because they were forced to through innovation because of the limitation, and put them into the studio that makes, Christmas Carol or Polar Express, and see what they can do with like infinite possibilities, right? Because sometimes it does feel that the technology, in these movies in particular, technology leads the story and it leads what they want to do, because like, how do we use these extra bells and whistles? What's the new release patch? What are the new features that we can do now that we couldn't do 3 years ago? And I think all of that starts driving what actually happens in the movie itself. It's weird. I guess again, we're in the middle of this evolution, so we still see, ooh, there's this new particle effect. Ooh, there's this new AI assisted or whatever. Like everyone's gonna leap to just incorporate that into the movie with like the cart leading the horse a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, something I heard was the idea that when we see these effects of especially the de-aging ones, kind of the best we're going to get from that is, oh, that looks pretty good, but we're still interfacing with it like as an effect.
It's like someone that has an ugly baby, right? Like you would never you don't say it out loud because it would be self-evident. It would be gonna just like break the moment. But like those are always gonna be these ugly babies of cinema, I think. These weird de-aging scenes.
Yeah, the other thing is one of the de-aging is the Irishman. They de-age De Niro, I think Pacino and Joe Pesci. Yeah, those guys all get de-aged. And one of the problems they had on set, and they had people there trying to make this not happen, but it still kind of looks that way in the end. When they look young, it's a pretty good effect, but you're still like, it's an effect, but they're moving like old men,
Right. There's a distinct difference. It's not just the face that would change over the course of 60 years.
Right. They just don't carry themselves. I mean, the way De Niro carried himself in the 70s, he's not doing that now. I mean, he shouldn't be expected to. He's older.
Well, he's wearing high heel shoes now.
Yeah. So, now A Christmas Carol, the other goal, I guess, for this was their idea that this is the third time Disney did A Christmas Carol, by the way. There's a Mickey's.
Are you including Mickey's?
Yes, I am. Mickey's Christmas Carol in the early 83 or something. Muppet Christmas Carols 94, 95 or something like that.
Yeah, I cannot keep comparing every other Christmas Carol to Muppet's Christmas Carol.
Oh yeah, that's the superior film, but I'm a sucker for Muppets. So what, although that is the first one.
I kind of dislike Muppets, and I still think that's the best Christmas Carol movie.
Okay, that's the first one without Henson, so that's a little bit of a bummer. But no, I'll do Muppets all day. Also, that one I don't like it because they stick a bunch of songs in there, and I prefer. Well, they stick songs in the Muppet movie too. Well, those are just better songs. Okay, so yeah, I didn't like the songs, I guess.
You got to sell these, extra soundtracks. You got to have the OST, and you got to have the score, and you got to have the limited edition. I think that it's all planned. Like, this is Disney formula territory. It has been since at least the mid to late 70s. I think that's all been okay. How do we structure everything that we do in a way that maximizes its income?
Um, right. But the goal for this movie, according to the creators, or I guess it's Zemeckis quote, was to just make an accurate version of the book, which there wasn't really a film version of that, question mark. I feel like I've seen something like from the 40s or something that does it relatively um book normal.
They did it. They got like specific quotes that came directly out of the book, and the whole thing with the two kids gripping on the bottom of the legs. I guess we'll get to all of that. But all of these were direct things that came right out of the book that you wouldn't even see in like the plays that they do out of Christmas Carol. So yeah, I
I'm
mean,
wondering if I just
well
got
done
dragged to
on
seeing
making it
this in play
accurate.
form as a kid. I'm trying to remember how did I do A Christmas Carol as a kid? Because we all know it quite well, I think, you know, or in the West we do. And I'm like, how? Because
I mean, I'm positive that I had at least 3 or 4 different classes as I was growing up that did a Christmas Carol play at some point.
that must be it. Um, and I guess one of the reasons I'm ragging so much on the animation for this one, and not even the animation itself, just the fact that they did this animated is like the script, like you said, it's not a bad adaptation of the book. You know, I like to see it done as an actual movie. Um, and
So I gotta just put cards on the table. I actually didn't hate the 3D of this, but it's not gonna be a classic. I don't think this will ever be any sort of definitive classic. And if they had done it live action with a little bit of 3D CGI, I think it could have been something that people would actually like put on. Not to say there aren't people that use this as Christmas as like a tradition even, but I think that's more of a product of its time. Like, it would date you if this became your Christmas movie. Because yeah, the uncanny valley thing is really hard to get over, and it is a shame because it is such an honest adaptation, and it legitimately makes a great case. Like, if you were ignoring the fact that they were trying to revive the original Christmas Carol and make an accurate version, but it actually does present a really good idea for, not being Scrooge and not sort of being like a bah humbug sort of character.
what is a humbug?
What is a humbug?
Okay, I don't think either of us know. Oh, you know what? Actually, my favorite Christmas movie, which also might date me, but it is actually speaking of other versions of A Christmas Carol. I watched Scrooge a ton. I think that actually is my favorite Christmas movie. So,
Yeah, I guess if we're including Scrooge, I guess that one is the best Christmas Carol movie. I mean, far better even than the Muppets Christmas Carol. It's so memorable. It has all I think whenever I imagined being visited by the ghost of Christmas past, it would probably be in that sort of scenario, right? Not that like my dad gave me a big hunk of like deli meat for Christmas or anything, but that's the image that comes to mind.
right, and their Ghost of Christmas Future is just so freaky and creepy, you know. I mean, yeah, and they got the Manson family Christmas promo in the background and that sort of stuff. I mean, yeah, it's hard for me to watching like 2009's A Christmas Carol. It is kind of like I want the weird pop culture messed up version of this more,
That's
you know.
another good example too of there's no weird uncanny valley aspect. I mean, you clearly see some of the CGI shows its date, but I think that one holds up and it's going to hold up way better than this one ever will.
Let's talk a little bit about the voice cast here, which there's a lot of times I love Jim Carrey. I don't really. The weirdest thing is second bill doing they're all doing multiple roles as Gary Oldman. I'm like, wouldn't Gary Oldman make a lot more sense as Scrooge?
This doesn't have any of the Jim Carrey that I want. I don't know how
Right.
that makes sense. Like, if you tell me that Jim Carrey top billing is doing Christmas Carol, I'm expecting something crazy over the top. I'm expecting Ace Ventura angle to it. And I know that he was probably in his serious phase, like well into it at this point. But that's not what we're here for. We're not here for this Jim Carrey. I don't think anyone is.
Yeah, he also did all three ghosts, but none of the ghosts. I mean, I think Jim Carrey, a big thing is his physicality. So he's mocapped, I guess, but it's not really him. We're not getting his actual face. We're getting some outcome of his face, I suppose.
Right.
But
This is like having Charlie Chaplin do your voiceover.
yeah. I just feel like this movie is like had a lot of things going for it. Again, I thought the script was good, but they're just like kneecapping themselves. Did any of the ghosts stand out to you? He did all three of those, so but I don't think
Yeah,
any
I
of
mean,
them.
somewhat. I think one specifically, the Ghost of Christmas Present, stood out just because it was clearly Bacchus or Dionysus. Like, it was absolutely a pagan god that was getting drunk and tripping and like sending you on a trip to rediscover. So it felt absolutely, that was the Saturnalia aspect. And then the first one, it wasn't necessarily well designed, but I really respect whenever Disney embraces death and Disney doesn't go this weird 1970s through 1990s like a kitty corner everything, where
For
they
the
even
Marley
have
ghost,
his jaw falls off and he has to use his hand to like keep talking. And I guess, I mean, they do have Pirates of the Caribbean. They have got like some aspects of creepy ghost stuff, but this one I really really liked. I mean, I thought that they didn't pull any punches, at least when it came to showing the concept of death. They even have the very opening scene. I think in the first 3 seconds, you're seeing a dead man's face with the pennies over it, and then you see Scrooge steal the pennies off of his eyes. So I don't know. I thought that for a Disney movie adjacent, that it was cool. Like, I actually
Hellraiser
really
for
really liked
kids is
it.
my note.
What was
Because he
that?
gets Hellraiser for kids, the way he gets dragged out of the room is like the Cenobites coming for you, you know?
Right, it had the same aesthetic too. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I thought that was incredibly serviceable, and so the first Ghost wasn't necessarily memorable, but I liked the liberties they took with it. It reminded me of one of the cooler ghosts you'd see at Haunted Mansion, and then the Saturnalia, and then the third one. I mean, the third one was just a shadow. It was basically the Grim Reaper rendered as a shadow, so it was hard to really pinpoint an actual character design there.
I guess maybe the book does have him a little more in the background. I don't know. Again, I'm coming from having watched Scrooged 80 times as a kid and wanting that giant, big, weird thing with a bone hand, you know? That's what I want. But yeah, Gary Oldman. So one, we got Jim Carrey doing a variety of accents from the British Isles for some reason, being a Canadian. Then we got Gary Oldman doing Bob Cratchit and that first ghost, Jacob Marley. And the motion capture for Tiny Tim. That's kind of weird. But I'm sitting there, wait a minute.
What?
Gary Oldman is British.
Gary
Why isn't
Oldman did the motion capture for Tiny Tim.
That's what it says on Wiki, man. It
But
sounds weird to me too.
you're burying the lead here. That's actually the most fascinating part.
How did that?
Well, I
Why?
always feel like that was a stipulation in his contract. No one understood why, but he just demanded, like, I have to do the mocap for Tiny Tim.
I hope so. But yeah, it's like flip those roles would make a whole lot of sense. You got Marley coming in with the Jim Carrey doing a weird voice thing. He wouldn't even have to do the accent. It's a small role, you know? But yeah, they were like, we want to be we want to be conscientious about the accents in this movie so we're hiring a Canadian. Okay.
Yeah.
So
They didn't have anyone else. There's literally no one left from the British Empire from Victorian days that looks or resembles anything like what they did back then.
they were all making that Harry Potter movie.
Right.
They were occupied. Well, Goldman. Ooh, Oldman, I guess, was doing both because he's also in the Harry Potter movie, or at least one or two of them. Other voices, just to shout out some names, is Colin Firth, Bob Hoskins, Robin Penn Wright, and Carrie Yules. But none of them were like major. They were just like little, I guess, voice.
They didn't need a
cameos.
single known name for any of this, I don't think.
No, I mean, this is a thing where it's just, like the story should sell itself. I mean, why not hire people, actual voice actors? Get Fred Tatascioni and Billy West on it, people who are actual voice actors.
It was weird. There might be like a crazy tax or like money laundering scheme or trafficking scheme somewhere beneath the books of all of this. I've learned after I don't know how much you know about Demolition Man and the finances thereof, but that has convinced me that every single movie ever created most movies, but like most movies, no matter how big the studio and how big the stars and how successful, they're all run like absolute money laundering schemes.
No, my the scene I think that completely describes Hollywood for me is that one in Mulholland Drive with the "This is the girl" stuff, and then
Oh man,
the
that's a deep cut. I
then
mean, it's
the
hard to
automaton girl
bring
comes
up
in
a
and starts.
David Lynch reference is like, here's what I think is a David Lynch scene.
No, just that one scene just seems to, for me, like get that whole vibe down. Like they're making their thing, it's fine, and then the corporate guys come and say, "This is the girl,"
Mhm.
I don't care about everyone else who's auditioning. Like they've already basically chosen out this is the girl. So that's kind of how these things work. When the money men walk in, they get to tell you this is the girl. Or Jim Carrey is in this movie as a mocap monstrosity. Like he did a series of unfortunate events a few years after this. Like tone down that makeup a little bit. He could, I mean, I think he would have pulled off Scrooge better if he was in that makeup, doing it.
Right, and it's almost the same character.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, well, here it's like, why are we mocapping it then? So, well, let's start prying open some Saturnalia-sized rabbit holes, I guess, in this one, because there is a fair amount. This is a pretty seminal work coming, I guess, 49, so it's a little bit before the big British occultist blast, isn't it? That's a little more like 1870s, 80s.
I mean, if you're referencing Crowley, maybe, but there was still,
Blavatsky and stuff,
there
was a little
was plenty
before.
of British occultism well before Crowley. There's an entire lineage that you can trace back to since before even the Brits.
Oh yeah. I guess I'm just talking about when it was kind of on the forefront of culture, sort of thing. Because I feel like a well-to-do Victorian English person might just kind of dabble in it for funsies because it was trendy at the time.
Well, if we laser focus that to spiritualism and the whole like spiritualist movement, this is pretty much a snapshot in time of all of that. Because the whole premise here is not too much different than conjuring some spirits or breaking out your Ouija board, or it's that same sort of era. And I think this is directly on the heels of the Civil War in the U.S., right?
No, it's a little before. That's why I'm bringing it up.
The spiritualism movement. So there's a direct thread between what gets established in the Christmas Carol, followed by the Civil War, followed by basically the absolute peak of spiritualists. Because
Okay.
I think that even like the discovery of a whole bunch of turn of the century inventions were all based on that same spiritualism that's kind of exemplified in how this entire movie is put together.
That's what I was thinking, and then I was reading up on the book itself, and it's like 1843. I assumed that it was written in like the 1860s or 70s because of what you just said, and then I'm looking at 1843. I'm like, that seems kind of early.
Well, think about it this way though, because like William Crookes, right? William Crookes was one of the spiritualists of like the technology movement in Great Britain, and I believe that he was in his 30s or 40s when he invents the cathode ray tube, and he's a spiritualist like diehard at this point. But he probably had those inclinations growing up, because if he's in his 40s dabbling in technology and linking it to like the actual spiritualist movement, that gets seeded as a kid. So like the Christmas Carol comes out and William Crookes is basically a young child. That influences the same exact thing for like Alexander Graham Bell, I think, was somewhat contemporary to all this.
That's kind of where I'm getting. I guess I thought this was a shaker, not a mover, but in 1843, this is totally a mover. It's a seed, like you just said. This is kind of one of the first blasts of, like it's kind of a seminal work of the spiritualist movement of the latter half of the 19th century. And I didn't kind of realize that till I looked at the date. Like Dickens was kind of ahead of the curve.
Well, because this one is not just an abstract haunting, and it's not necessarily ghosts that are coming to hurt you. They're ghosts that are guiding you, and they're almost seen as that this is what he needed to hear. There's almost a therapeutic or like a cathartic version of these ghosts that makes them like good entities. And I think that this kind of lines up with that spiritualist way. It's not that Scrooge is sitting down and conjuring these spirits up directly, but there's some aspect like a shadow version of him realizes that this is what he needs. So this is where the spirit world can interact and sort of guide and give information. And I think that's sort of one of those key components of the spiritualist movement, is they're not just these weird fly-by-night wind demons that, you know, might impregnate your wife as they like pass over your house, but now they actually are living in the same relative time period as you, and you can consult with them. I mean, I guess there's nothing new under the sun. Like even old Greek necromancy was essentially the same aspect, but I think their version of ghosts were less Victorian, floaty, glowy, and more like conjuring their literal physical body back out of the grave.
The other one that came to mind, but I haven't heard a good rundown of this for 3 years. I'm a little hazy. Maybe you're a little better on it. But the temple initiation for Masons isn't there like a fake death or something in there, and being guided by a few, you know, are you following what I'm saying at
No
all?
ghosts though.
No
There's
ghosts, but
there's no ghosts.
they're like, was it sorry, I'm like totally sputtering, but I was like, just in the back of my head, I was like, is there a connection here? And then maybe I'm off on that, but I was definitely thinking
that one is more of like a Disney proxy experience. That one is sending you through a distinct role play to where you die and are reborn. Like, so there's a very specific aspect of that, but it's way less to do with ghosts and hauntings and like Victorian spiritualism by any of that nature.
yeah, I guess I'm just thinking of being shown certain truths, and then Scrooge does get thrown into the grave at the end. So to me, that was sort of like a you die and then he's reborn and becomes, you know, Christmas fun boy.
Well, I guess except for in all the secret mystery schools, maybe except the Eleusinian mysteries where you were just tripping on Kaikion, whatever the hell that was in Soma, right? Where maybe there really was a line completely blurred between real and fantasy. But I think in nearly every other secret society, Skull and Bones, and even, you know, all the big ones, you still realize it's all pageantry. You know, you still realize that this is just a recreation and like a metaphor, and you almost have to trick yourself into like, okay, there's something practical here. But with the Christmas Carol, I think it's the exact opposite of that. I think that whatever they're showing Scrooge is real. It's his real past. It's not a reenactment of it. It's his real future. It's the real present. And they even emphasize that because during his Thorin ride, where they get to see how everyone is like toasting and saluting him, and I guess the most like the least realistic part of this entire movie is that the nephew and Cratchit that works for him, when we see them like spying on these guys modern day, they're still like, hey, he's not that bad, or like, hey, whatever you think of him, we're still toasting to him, it's still Christmas. Like, they're just absolutely altruistic to a fault, right? But I think that even when we go and we see all of those different angles play out, they're showing you the actual present, because then you see that when he goes and buys the goo or buys the turkey, and when he goes and like bursts into the room, they're telling the exact same joke that they were, or like it's a pantomime game. They were doing the exact same one that he had already seen in his vision. So it kind of proves that this was the real present and the real future and the real past.
But that does mean the ghost of Christmas Present is actually the ghost of slightly like 15 minutes in the future.
Maybe there is a reason why Zemeckis is on this, because he did create like the seminal time travel movie. And what is this other than just the Victorian version of Back to the Future?
Yeah, except he doesn't do weird stuff with his mom in this one.
Well, we don't know that. I mean, this was the Disney cut.
Yeah. Hey, here's something that I seem to remember in other versions, and maybe I'm just thinking of Scrooged again, but in this one, it's just whiplash. One goes to the next, and they even explain like you'll meet one at this time, and then like, didn't they say the next day? But he just kind of goes straight to the next coast. I guess he's been hanging out with the first one all day. Is the idea?
Good question, but I always thought that this all took place over the course of one night. There was no
That's
like
what I
next
thought
day
too.
stuff.
So then when they're saying next day, I'm kind of like. And then I'm like, isn't there like a little bit of downtime? But that might be Scrooged. I feel like he has a few like weird normal experiences between the ghosts and Scrooged, which, and I can't remember if that's the case in the book or if that was actually them just trimming a little bit in this for time or whatever.
Right, and was there a scene in the original Dickens version where they staple antlers to a mouse? What was
Uh,
it? Towards a rat, right? Was it a rat?
maybe you'd use rope at that time in 1843. I don't. Do they have staplers? I feel like that would be a more modern invention. Yeah, you need a little
Yeah.
mass production to make all those staples.
I don't think they had
So
super glue either. So yeah.
the ghost of Christmas past is basically Lumiere, Uncanny Valley Lumiere from Beauty and the Beast, I guess. And of course, that brings us back to our light bringer stuff, I suppose.
There's another. I think one of the cooler aspects of Scrooge in general. I don't know if you've ever seen any of these like Scrooge was the good guy theories before. Uh, Not wildly popular because he does hate Christmas and he hates everyone about it, but he kind of represents this grumpy old man that thinks that everybody are a bunch of idiots, and that really what he hates is poverty. And there's some like deeper breakdowns that I can get into with some notes, but he essentially hates poverty so much, and then he sees other people that in his mind are causing their own poverty, and that they could technically lift themselves out because they're British, and that I think that same eugenicist angle of Tarzan is still at play here, because he even mentions something about the world population sorting itself out when they come asking for food and money and for charity over Christmas. He's kind of like, this is for the world population. Like that'll just kind of solve itself. So clearly he's a eugenicist, even though this technically predates the term eugenics by about 50 years or so. But that doesn't mean that that wasn't always like this inherent sort of point of view that existed before it even had a name. So I think that aspect, but he's sort of like proven right as the movie plays out. Not that means he's a good guy or anything, but that it's about these families, and he's asking, why should I pay you for a full day's wages and you don't come into work? Like what if the roles were reversed? What if you came into work and I didn't pay you a day's wages? And I'm just like, oh, that's what we do on Christmas. Christmas, one person gets screwed out of the deal. He's making incredibly valid points that are really hard to dismiss, other than, but it's Christmas. Like if you just assume, but it's Christmas is the explanation for everything. They even make a really big point in the middle of the movie that this is the one day that men open up their cold hearts and they set aside their differences and they help each other out. And there's almost something nefarious about that too. Like I could sympathize with Scrooge if Scrooge is mad at the world because it's like, you idiots, why do you only do this on one day? Why are you so inconsistent? Like that doesn't make any sense at all. So I don't know. I'm not trying to sympathize with Scrooge. I'm just trying to sort of like step in his shoes a little bit.
I guess that subset of people that are like Scrooge is a hero probably read Atlas Shrugged right before reading A Christmas Carol.
Right.
Yeah, this guy knows. This guy knows what's up.
He yeah, he sort of is like an Atlas Shrugged, Victorian Atlas Shrugged.
Yeah. So, hey, and it is a cultural thing. This is a American British thing, right? Like, let me tell you my work week next week. I have an extra day of work next week. I'm working from December 23rd to the 28th. Every day is a work day. They're an hour longer. I come in earlier, and on Christmas Day and the next day, I'm so busy that I have 2 30-minute lunches instead of 1 hour lunch. So that's my Christmas.
Yeah, is there I guess like no respect for this Western Christmas tradition?
It's Halloween here. Here are the things that people do in Japan for Christmas. The Kentucky Fried Chicken about 30
Right.
years ago ran an ad campaign so good that everyone buys fried chicken. Even here, we'll probably have it, although we get it from the supermarket because we hate Kentucky.
Smart. This is like the diamond salesman that linked it with engagements or whatever.
Right. And chocolate cake, which I don't think is an American thing. I feel like we do cookies for Christmas. But yeah, when I tell my students, like, yeah, fried chicken is just a Japanese thing, and like they're shatters their brains. They just feel like Christmas is chicken. Presents are pretty much till junior high school. After that, you don't get presents. So
Well, and speaking of surprising Christmas poultry, and this isn't good as time as any to bring this up, but I didn't realize until watching this and then going back and referencing it in the book, but they make this point that, oh, maybe one year the children will be able to taste, turkey for Christmas instead of this, this nasty goose. But I mean, 2024, if I wanted to eat goose, it would probably cost a lot more money than it would turkey. So I guess goose was for poor people and turkey was for more well-off people on Christmas, and that was the original poultry. So, Japan, maybe they're just the next evolution that they've surpassed goose and turkey, and now they're just on KFC, which I do think is an upgrade.
okay, maybe. I was always I wanted the honey baked ham for Christmas. Turkey's too dry.
Me too. 100%, man. Yeah.
I was like, we already did the turkey for Thanksgiving. Although I haven't had turkey in more than a
Thank
decade. We don't
you.
do turkey in Japan. There's no turkey in Japan to speak of. I mean, you can find it if you really look for it, but yeah, they don't even know what Thanksgiving is. New Year's is actually the big holiday in Japan, so that everyone does have the day off for
duck,
New Year's,
right? Wouldn't duck be more traditional?
For where?
Oh, I don't know. I just assume Asia in general that there was more duck used than turkey.
Oh, you're just
in
thinking of
cuisine.
poultry. Okay, I thought we were talking about Christmas traditions, but
but no, I meant duck. They're right behind you.
No, but the big one here is New Year's. That's when everyone does have the day off. They started opening stores on New Year's like 10 years ago, and that was like, so now I guess somebody works on New Year's. But before that, the stores were closed, all that sort of thing. So that's the big one here.
Well, then how do you know when it's time to open your cold heart towards the rest of man?
You gotta do it every day, right? That's like Scrooge says. Maybe we are starting to paint him out as a hero. You know who I would have? Why didn't they put Rupert Murdoch in this movie? That would have been fun. Because Disney hadn't bought Fox yet. That's why.
See, regardless of your thoughts on how soon AI is going to kill us all, but we will be able to have, I think, in our lifetimes, where we can put on Christmas Carol and be like, now make Rupert Murdoch do all the voices and just watch it, and it'll do the thing. Like, I think technically we could have that now. There's just no financial incentive for all of the people that need to put the things in the right order and press the buttons to do that. But like the technology is here at this exact moment. We can do it.
Yes. You can make the most disturbing movies you want. Well, everyone will get to personalize their movies, right, at some point, which I don't know if that's good or bad, but who do you want here? It'll be like, Mortal Kombat. Here's 15 characters. Choose the ones you want for this particular
Well, it just means that we're going to be able to choose our own programming. You won't be able to program it yourself. You're still going to have to pick from like the versions that will just sell you the different variants of the Happy Meal toys, but you will have this semblance of choice. But here's the one word of wisdom from an absolute conspiracy theorist, paranoid. A lot of the times people turn to conspiracy theories and become ultimate skeptics because they're actually the most optimistic amongst people, or at least they started out so optimistic, almost like a naive level of optimism, that when that optimism gets crushed, they sort of retreat and do the exact opposite. It's a very reactionary kind of approach to the world. But that's sort of me too. Like, I thought the Guess Who pieces talked, and it shattered my world when I found out that they didn't. But I absolutely think that this is one of those examples that I don't know. I think it can have the potential to completely change everybody's perspective on the entire aspect of Christmas. Like, Christmas is the ultimate sort of mind control breaker, and if you could program your own version of these stories, now, I mean, is it a good thing that you're breaking free of generational programming where like you cannot escape the programming of Christmas if you live in the States, right? Like, even if you don't want to celebrate it and you don't believe in it, what all the symbolism is and all of the street signs and everything. You'll hear the music, like, you will be programmed by it. And that's kind of the same thing, that we all share this common programming, so that when someone says, Merry Christmas or whatever, like, the response, so you kind of fit in. But imagine a reality when and everyone doesn't agree on what Christmas is anymore because it's all been like so custom tailored. Like your version of Christmas is, honey baked ham and Die Hard, and my version of Christmas is, something completely different, and you no longer share that same thing. I mean, this is on a much wider scale. I guess a smaller scale would be me and you meet at the water cooler, and I'm like, hey, did you see that new whatever, that the new movie that just came out? But like my version was Arnold Schwarzenegger and your version was, a completely different actor. Like we won't have that same semblance. We won't be able to say, hey, did you see I mean, maybe sports might be the last remaining bastion where two people can be like, hey, did you see that game last night? Yeah, so and so threw the touchdown or whatever. But when we're talking about TV, movie, music, video games, like me and you don't have the exact same reference that we can even use. And I've torn mind on if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Is it good you get to cater your own programming, or is it better that we all share the same programming even if we don't have any control over it?
Well, I don't know. It's 10 years in the future. You walk in your friend's living room. You didn't knock. You probably should have, but you didn't knock. He's watching a porno where he's put his face on the faces of all the women in the porno. That's going to happen.
I mean, it's also very possible right now in 2024. You don't have to wait 10 years for that. Again, it's just a concept of scale now. And like we were saying, maybe you've got the version of Rupert Murdoch that did this movie, but also what if my version is, all Muppets? Like and you can do that right now. You can render an existing video and say, turn everyone into Muppets, make everyone
in a Muppet Christmas Carol.
like making everyone a golden girl in a bikini or whatever. Like you could do all of those things and see your own version of that, so that what is actually there's like a weird ship of Theseus analogy buried in there somewhere, because I could also be like, okay, keep everything that we just saw on Christmas Carol with Jim Carrey and Uncanny Valley and everything, but make this an Easter Bunny movie, or make this a whatever movie. That's the level we're not quite at yet, but the pieces would be there. But if we all did that enough, it's like, do we even watch the exact same movie? Do me and you have any frame of reference to like share observations about something once it's been custom tailored to each of us? Like there's no more control, I guess.
Well, think of how many translations there are of the Bible. So whatever you read probably wasn't the one somebody else read. And the story's a little different.
I guess so. Imagine too that in the near future that everyone has their own translation of the Bible. It's like, well, what gave King James any right to interpret, this passage to mean this when it gets translated? Here's my version of it. Like there's going to be the Matt's Bible and the Paranoid American's Bible and the Everyone's Bible, I think.
Please add 30% sci-fi and 40% humor to my Bible.
Right.
It's like the Interstellar
rewrite this, but Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah, it's like the Interstellar where he's talking to the AI on the ship. He's like, "Could you turn down your sarcasm 40%, please?" that sort of thing. But yeah, maybe you can do that in the future. Well, now I guess to a certain extent. The thing is, now you're basically just getting reconstituted pieces, and to do what you're talking about, I think there would have to be some kind of actual creation, which I guess is where AI isn't quite there.
Right. Well, look at this movie. Look at A Christmas Carol, where they 3D rendered all of these different characters, and they took the actual like a very direct adaptation of the book. So you could feasibly do everything that this movie did using complete, AI. The only difference is that final step where you compose it all together and you take the 3Ds and you render it and you like do all the voice acting on top. All of those things individually can kind of be done. It's just that the amount of effort to put that together, I'm sure, is already being undertaken by all of these companies. Like that's exactly where it's all headed. But the only difference is that they're making it so that their ultimate prompter will still be a Zemeckis. It'll still be an Eisner. It'll be a somebody that gets to type in what they prefer it to be. But once that scales to where anyone's got, like, they'll probably just have a new DVD player or something that comes out, which I'm already dating. I think I'm already dating myself to even say like a DVD player versus a Blu-ray or whatever the holograph player that they're going to come out with next. But that version will just have the certain capabilities. Do you want to change the voices of everyone, or do you want to change the visuals? like that'll be the next step, I think, directly. And this movie that's exactly what they did. They repurposed something all completely digitally. I mean, even the audio at a certain extent was likely recorded and enhanced all digitally. So they just had the actual budget to put all that stuff together. It would be the same concept of IBM installing a huge mainframe in a big office building that takes like 2 entire floors versus something that just fits in your pocket, roughly 50 or 60 years later. So I don't think it's going to take that much longer, because I do think it'll be in our lifetimes, but it'll probably be a couple decades until the technology is so advanced that it would be insignificant to stitch all those pieces together like it would right now.
I mean, sometimes I wonder watching new movies. I'm like, how much of this is actually written by AI, and they're just like not telling me, like it's the last 5 Marvel movies certainly felt that way.
I mean, I think that'll be the very real reality for us. And there is an uncanny valley aspect of that too, where there's telltale signs. And once you see enough of those telltale signs, even if you don't know what you're looking for, it'll sort of dawn on you. But also look at what we're comparing it to, right? If you're comparing the quality of AI to, say, like an average newspaper article or an average magazine article or something, all of that media that we've already been trained to sort of ingest now is already sort of dumbed down and oversimplified, so that the bar is much lower. It's no longer the same visual uncanny valley where the computer is competing with what nature or what God has produced. Now it's just competing with what we can produce, like our artwork and our writing and our music, and everyone is absolutely astonished at, like, wow, it's so good at all this. It's like, yeah, it's more of that. We're getting knocked down a few pegs. Like we thought that we were so far advanced that we're writing, these absolute treasure troves, but really AI can kind of knock it out of the park too.
Although my radar has been the strongest for looking at like music gear reviews, like looking up guitar synthesizer reviews. In the past 2 years, I've noticed so many more. Like I'm looking for a review, click. This isn't a real review. This is AI.
And honestly, it doesn't matter for most people, because if you think about it, it probably started with real reviews because it was very niche, right? And you would actually develop a following that people trusted your particular review. But over time, reviews become whoever the publisher is. Hey, stuff more keywords in there. Hey, throw more like names of all these different sort of like trademark phrases and things that'll get it better search results and ranked higher. And then at a certain point, there's like a flippening that happens where now it's the keywords that drive the article and making it SEO friendly versus the article that you just try and like get indexed more. I don't know. It's just a new reality. So I think that there's less competition.
Anyway, we should probably move along to that Ghost of Christmas Present, because that's a standout here where we get fat Jesus Bacchus. That's some fun stuff.
So he's literally tripping and showing you visions, and the whole room shakes, right? The rug starts to talk to you. This is all what actually happens in this movie, right?
Yeah. That's where the spiritualist part, we're getting the ghosts, we're getting the mind-bending stuff, which, like we said, the mystery schools is more of just a pageant. So this is kind of like where things get real, which I guess is always kind of the case, because wallowing in the past, how much does that do? All that does is make regret. So
well, ironically, the way that they portray it is sort of working like it's like a chronological inversion. For example, the very first ghost we see, he's basically this Victorian ghost, like a green sort of Ghostbusters ghost, the very first one, and that's 1880 spiritualism. But then the next one, which is Ghost of Christmas Present, when we see him, he's more of like a pagan. He's way older than Victorian era. He's like ancient history sort of era. And then when we go to the final ghost, that's like the most OG archetypical ghost you can imagine. That almost seems like it predates human writing or culture altogether. So even though they're sort of progressing in his life, it goes from old, current, new. The actual gods that are portraying these different aspects are not. They're actually newest gold to like the ancient ghost all the way to the most ancient.
So the Ghost of Christmas Future does. Here's the thing: it does seem to have sort of like the Chernabog role here, like the big black silhouette thing at the end of a Disney movie. But I don't think we can actually call the Ghost of Christmas Future evil. It's just creepy.
No, yeah, as much as Grim Reaper, I guess, would be evil.
Yeah, which Bill and Ted, of course, working out the best version of that. But but that's the whole point. That's just it's a living, right? It's like the animals in the Flintstones, right? It's a living, or it's a killing, I guess. Well, that makes it sound worse, though. So maybe death is bad. I don't know.
Well, even Bill and Ted's version. Oh, what was the original movie that was based on? Was it like the Seven Sins or something? So, anyways, their version of the Grim Reaper, in that particular instance, was also based on like some really classic OG cinema.
Yeah. So I guess that doesn't count.
Seventh Seal. I can't remember what it was.
It's Sign or Seal. I always one is a trashy late 80s horror thriller, and the other one is Ingmar Bergman. And I always get Sign and Seal a little bit mixed up, but yes. If anyone feels like searching that, they can do that, or keep screaming at the phone or whatever. Or my heater is screaming at me. Okay. So yeah, I guess that's the thing. They make it feel so evil, and I'm going for Scrooge again, where they really make it seem scary, I guess, but not evil. That's how the Scrooge movie does, and this one just kind of puts it in the background, which cinematically that is cool. I think it's kind of cool that he's just not, up in death's stank. He's a little distant,
I guess. Yeah. This is not the greatest way to exploit the medium, right? Like, you could have easily done all that shadow work in a practical sense. This is one of the many reasons why maybe the movie didn't do as great, or they didn't really use the medium to like their best advantage. Like, me and you could have made a shadow that like pulled back sort of like a bedspread, right?
It's like the only part that fully probably, well, you could say needed to be animated is the Bacchus section that goes to Christmas Present, because that has all the weird trippy stuff. They're tripping literally, but I would have liked to see them try and do that practically, or as a mix.
You've been on Soarin', right? Like, they have the capability to blend reality with the floor just gave out, and now you're seeing an entire world pass under your feet.
Have you seen the Soarin' Around the World, or just the one that's like
just
California?
the old version one?
Okay, because I just earlier this year, I did the newer version at Disney Sea, and it's still fun and everything, but a lot of that is now CG augmented. I think there's, like, when you think about the Taj Mahal, if you look at a YouTube vid, a few of the ones, you're like, what? This looks terrible.
What's wild too is that me and you are going through this like very analog animation, and then we clearly see when analog turns to digital, and then we see when digital turns to 3D CGI version of digital. And there's gonna be a whole nother version of all of this too, right? Like, we're just in the middle of this huge evolution. I wonder how long until the pendulum swings back, if there's ever going to be analog animation ever again, or if it just all becomes live action is the pinnacle. We're in a weird spot, though. We're in the complete inversion, where they take animation and make it look like they call it live action, but it's not actually live action. It's still all CG.
Yeah, they keep, it's like Aladdin live action. It's like, is it really?
It's not
the Lion King? The Lion King doesn't even have human characters. That's like basically a fully CG movie.
I think that just proves the absolute power Disney has over reality at this point, where they're telling you this is live action, and it's the exact opposite of live action.
I do remember watching The Jungle Book, the live action, quote unquote. Well, it's got the kid in it, right? So it's like how Life of Pi is live action, Although the whole thing there, they were like, oh, it's not really live action. Our actors here, but the tiger's digital. And that sea is digital, and you can't tell. Well, then you can kind of tell a little, but
right. And again, you just give yourself 5-10 years, and then you can absolutely tell.
And they spent so much money trying to make it look good in Life of Pi that the company that did it like went bankrupt right after, right? Like
I mean,
people were
that's
amazed,
also
but
a
they spent too
trend.
much
What's a
money.
huge trend with these huge blockbuster movies that these huge studios put out? They also can, run an entire studio completely underground.
Yeah. Um, People dying. They make, of course, a child dying is a tragedy, and nobody wants to see Tiny Tim die. But I'm like, the mortality rate was really high in 1843, so it's not unsurprising.
Yeah, well, yeah. Have you read any other Dickens books? It doesn't usually work out very well for the kids.
Dickens even knew. That's right. And then Scrooge himself dies on January 7th, which I don't know if they mean next week or next Christmas. For that, it was a little unclear to me. I guess it doesn't matter anyway. He's already an old fart.
Right, and
January.
and would this all have happened if he wasn't planned to die? This almost felt like this was the spirit world's version of giving him his last chance to not be an absolute scumbag on his way out of the world. But also it seems that the things that he did in those final moments, I guess, that doesn't really balance out an entire lifetime. But also all the things that he did, it seemed that he might have been merciless and maybe even cruel, but only in the matters of money and business. It's not like he was going and like harming anyone or physically, attacking anybody. He was just living everything to the utmost letter of like, capitalism, like crossing every T and dotting every I and ignoring all other human interaction outside of that. But would the gods care? Would the gods care how well you played along to like the programming that was inherent to like that realm you were in? I don't know. It's a weird concept that like, would he have been punished? Like, was he actually doing anything bad with his life?
Yeah, it's like if you only have 2 weeks left to live, why not just start throwing your money around? That true altruism? If you're like definitely on the way out, you just got like confirmation from death himself.
Right. So basically, Scrooge being visited by these, ghosts of Christmas and then changing his life around in the final days or even year, if you give it a whole year, it has that same vibe as like the mafia don that's on his deathbed and he's being given last rites and he like, prays for forgiveness. And, it almost has that same sort of logic applied here.
Yeah. And then I wrote at the end, do you know what the ending narration is? All I did was write weird ending narration and did not make a more detailed note.
I didn't make that same note, so no.
Okay. Yeah, that I shouldn't have made that note. Oops. Oh, music is Alan Silvestri, who also did Back to the Future. So we do have several future guys on here, I guess.
Again, this is a very much a time travel movie. That's like A Christmas Carol's maybe one of the older. It might be one of the first Christmas time travel movies.
Are there?
Stories.
That's right. Well, until modern times, I don't think we really have any. Also, 18. I keep want to say 1843. I mean, Christmas is a very different deal at the time, I think. I mean, it's here. Night Before Christmas is somewhere around here. I mean, it's also where I guess Christmas is becoming a little more of a big holiday. Again, Scrooge can make this guy work on Christmas. That's fine. Where 100 years later, oh no, you can't do that.
Unless you're in Japan.
Right. Well, I'm talking the States and England, I guess, but
I guess, yeah. Well, it takes place in 1836, the original one, and then, or it starts out in 1836 when he dies, and then 7 years pass until we see all of these events take place.
Right.
So we're basically talking 1840s, right? 1843.
Yeah. Because I mean, like modern Christmas really gets cranky with Santa, which is what, the 1910s or something. Is that when all the Santa ads kind of made him ubiquitous in the
Everyone says
culture?
Coca-Cola, but that's not really true. There's absolutely other versions of Santa, like a big jolly. A lot of it also comes from Germanic folklore. A lot of
Oh, right, but
European
I
folklore
think the
kind of have
idea
that.
of big jolly giggling Santa and just being the focal point of Christmas, as opposed to anything
Right, well,
religious is
because
about
the
that time.
other I guess the more historically accurate version of Christmas was everyone celebrating that they didn't die. Like, they made it to the worst possible point, in terms of starvation and sickness and everything that can go wrong, sort of worldwide pandemics aside, right? We just got lucky that our pandemic, recent one, course correlated a little bit with, the Christmas season, but usually the Christmas cheer and celebration was just about, "Oh my god, we didn't die. We made it one more year, and then it's only gonna get better from here. The weather's gonna start getting better." So it was a celebration that we made it past the worst possible point, right? The sun has died, but we're still here, gosh darn it. So that was the original celebration. So I think that the migration of the, like, "Hooray, we didn't die," it loses a little bit of its relevancy, so then it's easier to turn it into this token. Now it's like, "Hooray, we get to drink Coca-Cola and open presents," but the original premise, you peel back all the layers, it's like you survived. Thank God you survived because so many people died.
I mentioned that in Japan, the New Year's the bigger holiday, and they moved that. It used to be April Fool's Day would have been the old school New Year's. The idea being it's right after the spring equinox, right? And still in Japan, school year starts in April. Um, People start their jobs in April, so in most ways, April still is the start of the year in Japan. Like in terms of my job, I'm like April is the new year, which kind of makes sense. I mean, having your new year in the right at the start of the coldest part of winter seems a little rough.
Well, I mean, I would say that, like, Christianity itself is like a consolidation of convenience. You take all of these extra gods and rules and dates and all sorts of stuff, and you're just like, look, it's all just this one thing now. You celebrate all the gods on, like, just this one, or maybe just like a handful of days. It's all the same god every time. And I think Christmas is like a further escalation on that simplification, where now, even in this movie, when they talk about Ghost of Christmas Present, he mentions that, it's me and my 147 brothers or whatever, like all 140 whatever of them, that or all 1,000 of them. He's basically saying that every year is a different brother. But I think that sort of aspect is a convenience thing, where not only is it the death of the year and all this, but the rebirth of that year, an old man being replaced by the little baby, that whole New Year symbolism is just so much more convenient to turn into just this one holiday. Now it's a religious thing and it's a practical thing. It's like a farmer's almanac sort of thing. And that's the reason, because you're talking about Easter as sort of like a rebirth
I mean,
version of this.
religious from a religious perspective, that's the much more major holiday, right?
I get, yeah, it's the more religious version of it, but
Culturally, it's
also
Christmas, but if you were getting dogmatic or to doctrine or whatever you want to do, it would be Easter. So that's
right,
the big one.
but the social, like the cathartic release, the programming that we all go through, that we've turned the new leaf, that's New Year's now. Now that's January 1st. It would have been, kind of like thematically, that would have been Easter that you're talking about, but that's less convenient. It's more convenient to just combine all holidays into one holiday. It's just like the New World Order, right? Like, you take all the religions and you make one world religion. That's kind of the track that I think a lot of these things are on. Like, it tends to, and it's not like it's actually simplifying. It's actually making it way more complicated, because now you're just like mashing everything into a big ball and trying to figure out, if you took every single color of Play-Doh and mashed into a big ball and started mixing it, it would be like trying to, like, pick those original colors back out again. At a certain point, it becomes an impossible task. But now there's just this one big ball that you got to worry about that's just one color.
Yeah, I guess that's why I'm bringing up the thing in Japan, because in Japan everyone knows the year starts in April, but they move their New Year's back to January 1st just to make nice with all the other cultures.
Is that true? I mean, that's kind of a surreal sort of because that's really how it does work, but we've already become so acclimated to consolidating our holidays into just the one
Right.
major holiday.
Because remember, China's like piss off. We're doing New Year's when we want to do New Year's, But for business, of course, they'll date it according to um, what everyone else is doing. But yeah, Chinese New Year's, middle of February or something?
Yeah, and they just absolutely shut down. I think it's end of January, early February, and I only know this because that's all my a lot of the printers that I work with in China all give you deadlines. Like we basically just disappear from the planet for 2 weeks or more during this time period. We don't care that we are the world like hub of all manufacturing. Everything shuts off.
But I mean, even Christmas, like they don't really know when Jesus was born. So it's like, okay, well, we can appropriate the old holiday and just throw it in there, and everyone's happy. And a few thousand years later, you'll get Santa Claus.
It's convenient, and I think there's something to be said for that. Like the convenience actually makes it last way longer.
Yeah. Did you have any other big things in your notes you wanted to crack into?
I had a couple. I mean, we'll jump around through them because I know we're already running long for a Christmas Carol. I got a lot of notes. I have a lot of notes on this. So, one of them is again the decrease the population message. They said he literally says decrease the surplus population, which kind of proves that there was this like eugenics mindset that predates even the world the word existing, because the eugenics is first defined in 1883 by Francis Galton, and without that, that's usually where people say, well, that's when it started. No, you can see in A Christmas Carol that eugenics was already alive and well full generations before Galton ever
Hey,
even
I'll give you
defined all
another
that.
100 year, the British Empire, the sun never sets, right? I mean, there's that
Right, it's
mindset
yeah,
going in that
it's
sort of
just
thing.
that someone came up with a fancy name at some point, but it predates it to such a degree that it's persistent even in this book, and they kinda use that as this appalling version, but really that's like the most British thing that he could have said, I think. That really is like Ebenezer Scrooge kinda represents the British Empire in so many different ways in this story.
He actually has a son. It's Tarzan out in the Congo or
Right.
whatever.
And yeah, just like you put Scrooge into the forest, in the rainforest, he will start a successful business enterprise, like guaranteed. Um, he again the one part I think was my favorite when the ghost skull breaks off. It's actually the ghost of Jacob, his original worker that we see putting the two pennies. And I also wonder if Scrooge had not taken the pennies off of his eyes, which probably made it so that he could not pass into the afterlife, right? Because that was your tuppence or your 2 pence was your fee in order to pass, and it was like a river Styx kind of thing. But if you don't give them the money, then they don't get the pass. So did he actually help himself out unknowingly here? Like he created a ghost, and that ghost ends up giving him the second chance to make right in his life before he dies.
We did
If
it
he
just
had
to
just let
eternally
him
damn his business partner then.
right, but he damned the business partner, but it saved his life in the process. Because if he had not taken the gold off, he had not damned his business partner, then the business partner just would have floated off into the afterlife, and there would be no reason for him to come back and talk to Scrooge again, right? Isn't that how this works?
I guess that's why they had, Gary Oldman sounding properly grumpy as Marley, right? So Jim Carrey couldn't sound like a grumpy Marley who'd been eternally helping the person who eternally damned you. That's a supernatural mind trip.
There was also another, I guess, ghost slash character, and that was the candle flame, which you already mentioned was like Lumiere in Beauty and the Beast. It was kind of like a live action version of that, but that one was probably the most occult Rosicrucian aspect of this entire movie, I think, because he kept talking about this literal flame. Like this is just Rosicrucianism or masonry,
See,
essentially.
that's
Of
where I started wondering if should I compare this to like their initiation or whatever, because that candle was making me think it too.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, again, it's just like an oversimplified Christmas children's movie version of all this, but that candle and all of the metaphors, they're just kind of like dripping with the metaphors. He's talking about, this is a direct quote, would you so soon put out with your worldly hands the light I give? I mean, this is like suppressing Jeebus, or this is suppressing like this inherent spark, like the Promethean flame. So I think
Don't
that
suppress Lucifer.
that's that's where, yeah, this is like, don't suppress Lucifer on Christmas out of all the days. Also, the version of them flying through air when he's with Ghost of Christmas Present, Dionysus or Bacchus, and they're tripping and they're looking through and they're doing the Soren thing. This reminded me so much of a book that I'm gonna ham fist into every time that it can even slightly come up. It is The Voyage to the World of Cartesius, or the Cartesian Voyage, where they describe Rene Descartes snorting DMT and then flying into outer space and being taught about vortices and Rosicrucianism from basically these ascended masters, and that he would come back into the mundane, real world again and bring some of this knowledge with him. This feels like just another version of that, where he takes some sort of a drug, he starts tripping out, he flies all over the place, he gets a different perspective on life, and then gets to reincorporate that back into his actual life. Like, this is a story that you can, and that the reason that I think that's so remarkable is that the Cartesian Voyage, or the Voyage in the World of Cartesius, was written in 1684. So this is like a full 150 years predating this whole entire concept of flying around and having these masters. And not to say that was the first time that was ever presented either, but just like the aesthetics of it, like the visuals that are portrayed in that book and in this book, kind of show like a little bit of a thread, so that this wasn't a completely new sort of brainchild. I thought that one's an interesting one.
I was sitting there wondering, I wonder if Dickens had been lucid dreaming, because that's kind of especially the Christmas Present, but the whole thing could be like, or a vivid dream, like I was saying last week. Sometimes the vivid dream is actually more useful than the lucid dream. So maybe this is that very vivid dream, There's
also a reference a few different times in this about like the chimney sweeps, and it just reminded me of all the occult chimney stuff that we dug up when we were doing Mary Poppins and Dick Van Dyke, and like this luck. And if you also look at old postcards from around this era, the chimney sweep was a main symbol on these like Victorian postcards, and because the chimney sweep was seen as the same good luck token, they would be holding 4-leaf clovers. It'd also be around these Amanita muscaria mushrooms all the time. So there's like this weird, like tripping Saturnalia sort of Bacchus Eleusinian mysteries link. And I was trying to look at like what was the actual reason behind this luck. Neither of these stories make any sense, so I don't think that these stories are the real ones. But one of them was that a chimney sweep saved a bride on her wedding day and then like kissed her and ran away or something, and then now all of a sudden that becomes this symbol of good luck. But really, all these chimney sweeps, these were children. These were children being exploited and being forced to work because nobody else could fit into these tiny little chimneys. So that if you actually look at pictures of chimney sweeps from the 1800s, it's all just children. There's no Dick Van Dykes. There's no grown men that are doing this job. So I think it was almost lucky again that like they even survived the job, and they might have been paying a little bit of homage of like, well, now you get to be a symbol of luck. Like that's the payoff of having this horrendous job that most of you will never be able to live into your old age. So it actually became like a rare sight to even see a chimney sweep.
Soot came into style as a fashion statement.
There was another version too where like a King George was riding on horseback and a dog runs into the crowd and the horse rears up and he almost dies, but he gets saved by a chimney sweep. Yeah, none of those make any sense to me. I feel like those were all based on different stories that just never got fleshed out. Like, they just haven't made it into modern times.
Well, it's like how 10 years ago there are all those stories about Chuck Norris, right? He was like our chimney sweep of the 2010s.
I was never on the Chuck Norris train.
I would, that's when Facebook, I just get tons of Chuck Norris memes and stuff. So, but that kind of made me think of the same thing. Like, obviously there's not actual accounts or things. So
So, but my last, I swear, my last eugenics tie into this. But I think that it's the crux of this entire movie. I think that eugenics is the thing that ruins Ebenezer Scrooge's life. Because when we go back in time and we see Ghost of Christmas Past, and first he sees Fezziwig, and he's all excited because this was his first job, and he's talking about this was his first mentor. So his very first apprenticeship is at this Fezziwig company, and slowly as like he goes from excited because this is where he got involved in the mundane world and his mastery of it, but then it forwards a little bit. They're at a Christmas party, he's enjoying Christmas, but then he meets his soon to be wife, and wouldn't you know that she is blonde hair, blue eyes, like she is an Aryan goddess essentially. And they fast forward a little bit in time and they show that they're having a fight, and she's basically saying, you know, I release you from marriage. Like she's verbally giving them a divorce, it seems like, because she realizes that he is such a master and so obsessed with the mundane world and, like, you know, fiscal advancement and just being like a rich studious guy, that she doesn't have a dowry. She calls herself a dowerless woman, and it's like, would you still have chosen me now in your current mind state? And I think that, and they used him sort of becoming cross the world, but they don't actually have an explanation of why he became this way. Like if everything was going right for him, why does he start turning into this bah humbug Scrooge archetype? And eugenics makes the point here. I think that at a certain point, if he is so rational and everything he runs through this very strict, consistent logic of his, he realizes, I'm not blonde hair and blue eyed. Like I don't fit into the actual point of eugenics here. I've got this frail body, you know, I've got like a horrible family line. I can't actually mix with this perfect Aryan goddess. So that's why he breaks it off, and it absolutely destroys him inside, knowing that in order to be consistent, he has to break ties with his future wife. And that's literally what turns him into Scrooge. Is the only thing that makes sense to me, because at no point does he have to make some sort of choice between her and finance. It's almost like he just starts making a little bit of money from his apprenticeship at Fezziwig, that his heart just turns cold because of it. And then when they break up, his heart was already cold, and then it just gets worse and worse from there. But they pointed that exact moment as like the thing that broke him, but clearly something broke him prior to that particular conversation.
Yeah, yeah. Or I mean, did it to himself, I guess, is the main thing. But hey, I just wanted to throw out, this is on a few different tangents. I was just looking at adaptations of the story, and the one that I would have seen growing up would have been the 1970 musical adaptation starring Albert Phineas Scrooge and Alec Guinness as Marley's ghost. I was like, I know there's one where I'm going to see it and be like, oh yeah, I saw that one a lot. So that would have been the one they were probably
That
showing on
sounds
TV.
familiar. That sounds real familiar.
Yeah, so that would have been the yearly one. Then of course when Scrooge came along, I forgot all about that one, right? So
And one other note too, I guess another occult note here is there's a very specific scene in which Scrooge is flying through the air, and then you see this weird silhouette of him in front of the moon. He's like flying in front of the moon. He's literally a man in the moon. And biblically, the man in the moon come from the book of Numbers, but it was they caught somebody working on the Sabbath and stoned him to death. So there is one interpretation of like an occult, European occult version of Man in the Moon is somebody that's being punished because they were working when they shouldn't have been, which also kind of represents this Ebenezer Scrooge archetype, right? He's forcing people to work on Christmas and he shouldn't be. And that's kind of construed to be like the Sabbath. Like he not only himself is working on the Sabbath, but he's forcing other people to work on the Sabbath. And that's really the ultimate sin. Like you were put to death for doing that in the old days.
have we discussed what people see on the moon in Japan before?
Right, it's the rabbit
Rabbit making rice cakes, yeah. So
yeah, making the moki cakes for
that's
how do you
yes.
pronounce the goddess, like Changye or
Oh geez, that
Chang?
doesn't sound Japanese.
It's Chang and then an apostrophe E.
Okay, I think is that a Japanese name? So okay, I don't know. Actually, I don't know the name of the goddess. I just know there's a rabbit up there making mochi. Yeah. because we saw these metalworks. My parents visited last month. We were at a museum with these metalworks, and my dad was like, "Man, dude must have been really high when he made that one," because it was the rabbit making mochi like metalwork.
Well,
And
hold on. If there's a Japanese and a Chinese interpretation of a rabbit in the moon, wouldn't those basically be the same thing?
it would be the
just
same
with
thing. I'm just saying the
alterations?
name. Yeah, I don't,
Okay.
I can't recall the Japanese name, and I'm thinking what you're saying sounds like the
It's like a
Chinese name.
Greek Rome kind of deal,
Yes,
I
yes,
think.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. That's what I'm getting at. My last thought is wondering if, for you as a child, I just got really confused between Marley and Bob Marley for a while.
Yeah, you're not allowed to name anything Marley anymore without it automatically taking on a Bob Marley connotation. Sorry.
So
And
that
even about the stupid movie about the dog that dies, same thing. Like I can't not think about Bob Marley even when the dog's dying. Spoiler alert.
Oh man. I guess we'll start wrapping up for today then. And if you got to the end
So
of your notes there.
my favorite scene in the entire movie is when we see the ghost of Christmas Present talking about he's about to die because he only lives for 1 year, and it's like when the clock hits midnight, that's when he expires. And then Ebenezer sees like a little hand, and he's like, "Is that a hand or a claw?" And he basically flashes him. He opens up his robe, but inside of his robe are these two children. There's a boy and there's a girl. The boy is ignorance and the girl is want, and he's basically saying like beware of them both. And this, I think that this boy ignorance and girl want, this was a reference to that whole premise where he was given an explanation of why he didn't want to contribute to the poor, and he was saying that we've already got prisons, we've already got workhouses, and then we see that one of them ends up in like a straitjacket. So this is also directly from the original A Christmas Carol book. These two like street urchin looking children, ignorance and want, which are kind of like demons. They're sort of like these demonic entities. So anyway, that was my favorite scene in the whole movie. It is incredibly occult the way that they're representing these like personifications of these two children that are going to be like the harbingers of death and basically like the ruin. Like they represent humanity.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing. This movie does a good job with the present part, because I feel like in other versions you're just waiting to get to the Grim Reaper,
You were just waiting for the Scrooged, and now I think I have to rewatch Scrooged as well.
I do too, actually. It's been a few years. I guess we'll wind down though. If you want to tell people what's up for Christmas, or maybe you're just after Christmas season.
Yeah, this will be the just after Christmas season. I don't know what I've got planned for 2025. I've got a whole bunch of different releases. The IlluminatiComic.com went really well. I've got at least 3 more of those ready to go right behind it. I've got a comic on Bigfoot where you can see is doesbigfootexist.com. I've got titaniccomic.com. That's another little pamphlet about the Titanic. All the different conspiracy theories you ever heard about it. Another one called satanicpaniccomic.com. This is basically a little chick track on the origins of the satanic panic in America specifically. It covers the entire world, but it really gets into the names, dates, and chronology of Satanism in the States. And a little spoiler alert on that one too, that it did not start in the 60s or the 70s. And it didn't go from Salem and then resurgence back when like the Manson family came along. There was a long, detailed thread that you can show the migration of Satan into pop culture through Hollywood and music and everything. So that's what I've been working on. Those are the things that are going to be coming out hopefully in early 2025, or at least the campaigns for them. So you can follow all those at paranoidamerican.com.
Yeah, that's for me. I do a bunch of podcasting. You see the link there if you're watching it. If I can point at Roving Sage. Sorry, that's a different thing. Podcastius.org. I talk about a bunch of movies there. The Twilight Zone, Planet of the Apes, Space 1999, kind of a weirdly occult show from the 70s. And if you really dig it, go for Podcastius Patreon and throw a tuppence or something at us.
Isn't that weird too? That the tuppence thing, 2 pence, and there were 120 pennies in a or no, there were 20 pennies in a shilling, or the math didn't make any sense. There was like 240 cents in a pound. I didn't get that.
Dude, I've been on metric for the past 15 years.
Paranoid. Yo. I scribble my life away, driven to write the page. Will it enlighten your brain? Give you the flight, my plane, paper the highs ablaze. Somewhat of an amazing feel when it's real, the real, you will engage it. Your favorite, of course, the lord of an arrangement. I gave you the proper results to hit the pavement. If they get emotional, hey, maybe your language, a game, how they playing it well without Lakers. Evade them, whatever the cost, they are the shapeshift. Snakes get decapitated, met is the apex. Execution of flame you out, nuclear bomb distributed at war, rather gruesome for eyes to see. Max them out, then I light my trees. Blow it off in the face, you're despising me for what though? Calculated and rather cutthroat. Paranoid American must be all the blunt smoke for real. Lord, give me a day away, vacate. They wait around to hate whatever they say. Matters not in the least bit. We get heavy rotate when a beat hits, so thank us, you're welcome. Fuck the niggas for real, you're welcome. They ain't never had a deal, you're welcome. Man, they lacking appeal, you're welcome. Yet they doing it still, you're welcome.